So a question I get asked a lot, particularly in the most recent video where I talked about my pedalboard setup, is what cab sims are you using? What IRs are you using for your bass sound? And I've dove deep into this topic. I've gone through tons of IRs. Some were free sample packs, some I found on like Tone 3000, some I paid for, some came free with the Darkglass suite that I use. So I thought I'd walk through my 5 favorite IRs I use for bass. So what is an IR? Long story short, it's a way of capturing the sound of a particular rate. In bass playing, we usually see this as a way to capture the sound of a speaker and a microphone. But I've seen people use this, for example, in the audio mixing world as a way to capture like reverbs. One of my profs in university actually used to go around collecting impulse responses from different rooms he'd go to. He'd be like, oh wow, this church sounds so good. Let me get an impulse response of it. So yeah, common misconception, IRs are just a really complicated EQ curve. Somewhat correct, but I'd like to think of it less of like an EQ curve and more like almost like a reverb curve that has some EQ built into it. So long story short, the reason I use these so often on bass is it's a really good way to tame your bass sound and make it mix ready. By that I mean, if you're new to playing your bass through DIs, you get a lot of extra sub-low frequencies that are really muddy. And you get a lot of like shrill high end and buzz and nastiness that happens in high frequencies, particularly if you use distortion. If you're used to playing through amps though, you usually don't notice this because those speakers are actually filtering out those frequencies. Bass cabinet speakers actually don't produce sub-lows, and they don't produce a lot of super high highs unless you have a tweeter. So for me, that just kind of cleans up my bass signal, makes it sound a little more natural, more like I'm using an amp, which makes me more comfortable. And I also love that because each impulse response is different, it's a really great way of me being able to like switch between very dramatically different sounds just like that without having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars and take up rooms and rooms of apartment space with like 100 different kinds of SPTs. So with all the sciencey mumbo jumbo out of the way, let's go through my top 5 impulse responses I'm using right now. So first up, here's my bass with just nothing on it. So it sounds fine, but it's got a bit of this like scratchiness. Really bringing out like fret noise and stuff. And yeah, sure, if you had a high pass, low pass filter, you could get rid of a lot of that. I'm not saying you have to use IRs, but for me, they just cleaned up a lot. So the first impulse response we have is the Darkglass Black and Yellow. Very clearly, this is a reference to Mark bass. Mark bass are known for being a very transparent kind of amp. They have a little bit of like an accentuation in the mids. I don't even know if that's true, or I don't know if we just got so used to ampegs being kind of scoopy that a flat amp kind of sounds mid-focused. But Mark bass is like the choice of like players like Richard Bona and like Joe Dart. So something like, you know, if I go a little more bridge pickup, a little treble off, maybe some bass off. It's kind of got a bit of that. The bit of like bark you expect from like Joe Dart. This cab kind of makes me want to play that kind of like rolling 16th note, kind of like. It kind of makes me want to do that kind of like that thing. This is a cab I find sounds really good clean, like we've been hearing. This is all in active mode. If I go passive, maybe a little more neck pickup. It's definitely got a nice presence to it. One thing I do find it lacks a little bit is when you start to get into distorted tones. Actually, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Go into passive. I find the distortion sounds a little nasal, barky, but it's not terrible. My number 2 impulse response is the Ampeg B15 from Shiftline. One thing I really like about Shiftline is, unlike Darkglass, where you know you kind of have to buy the product to have access to them. I mean, there's people who've like done like prior versions of them. There's what was it? One of the NAMM apps called it like Darkglass or something. Shiftline is completely free, which is why I really love recommending their stuff. And this is their take on the Ampeg B15. So if I go into passive with a little neck pickup, it's nice. It's got that B15 kind of sound. It's really cool. If I put a little scoop on my Empress compressor, and it makes me want to do that kind of like very like 60s, 70s bass line of like. Like, it just sounds so lovely. You can immediately understand why the Ampeg B15 was such a success. I will say one thing it lacks in is it doesn't have, whenever I crank the treble, it doesn't have a lot of top-end clarity. Like, it's not a great slap. It sounds a little weird on slap. Also, the B15 was conceived pre-5-string bass era, so definitely. Yeah, like even there. Like I notice as soon as I go from that D to that G, the G just speaks a little more to me. Maybe I'm just hearing things, but I just feel more comfortable with other IRs for low B stuff. Yeah, if you want a B15 sound, this is ideal. And just to show it with like a passive P bass with flats. So here it is with a P bass. Oh, that sounds lovely. Tone's just back a little bit. Once again, it doesn't sound incredible with the high end clarity. Try picking it a little bit. Oh, that sounds great with a pick. Palm muting in there too. That's all in the scoop sound. Try to add a little bit grit. Once again, a little honky. Back to my work for some distortion tones. Not bad, not bad. Like, I like it, but I think we'll see going forward. There's some cabs that do a little bit better job with this. So now, going back to Darkglass, we got the Nolly's Mega Melt. This cab is probably one of the most popular Darkglass cabs. It really just captures that Darkglass thing. It has got a ton of top-end clarity, which, I mean, is great for slap, like. Not a great slap player, but it's good for that. Pick playing. We have a bit of mid-cut from the Empress. This really makes it really sound like I'm going through a really nice amp, and I don't even have any like distortion or overdrive or anything yet. A bit of overdrive from Darkglass. A little mid-heavy. Let's do this mid-scoop on the Empress. That's just kind of the sound that like. It's just the kind of sound that sounds a little aggressive on its own, but you put it in a mix with like some Les Pauls going through Marshall stacks, and it just really sits well, cuts through, supports the mix. The next one I'm going to put up on the screen, it's something I got from Tone 3000s. It's a Hartkey LH1000 mic'd up with a mix of mics or whatever. What I really like about this one is this is kind of like my go-to for like punk and pop punk kind of stuff, where you want a really nice controlled low end. Like you think of players like Mark Hoppus, like there's not a ton of low end in the bass. It's mostly coming from the kick drum. And you want to be able to have that kind of melodic singing quality, like that. I mean, with some chorus. I like songs like Carousel. I actually don't use this IR a ton with this bass. I use it mostly with this guy, which is kind of like my like modified like ESP in the PJ format. It takes treble really well. Yeah, it's just great for that like rolling pick. Little dirt. Finally, my number one IR, the one that I'm using like pretty much every gig. What I love about this Olympic SVT is like it's just got such a nice controlled low end. It feels almost a little compressed. And it's just passive towards the neck pickup. Like that's just my compressor on, and that just feels so much to me like a real Ampeg amp. It takes distortion really well. But in a way that doesn't sound too in your face. I could always dime it back if I bring the treble back a bit. Bring the treble back, I kind of get that kind of like the very country like. It does have a lot of top end clarity to your slap stuff. I can still kind of get that mid-rangey growl thing, like. The reason I'm using this IR so much is because unlike the other ones where it's like they all do something really well, this one kind of does everything decently. Like you see, like it could do rock, maybe not as well as the Darkglass cabs. It could do that jazzy, growly thing, maybe not as good as like the Mark bass copy. It could kind of get into that like B15 kind of territory, like. But yeah, that's it. That's all of my IRs that I like to use on bass. I've went through literally hundreds, and these 5 are more or less the ones that I stick to the most. Nice thing is that these are all either just free. You can download them off like Tone 3000 or Shiftline, or the Darkglass ones. They're free if you own a Darkglass pedal. At least it's not like something like you could buy a pedal and you have to go and still pay for IRs. So let me know in the comments what you think. What do you think of the sounds of some of the IRs I was presenting? What IRs are you using? I'm curious. I'm always trying out new things. I mean, I've landed on these 5 now, but it's been a journey over the last few years. Like I said, cycling through hundreds of different options. And yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.